Now, pretty much the big Star Wars rumor going around right now is that Lucasfilm is on the verge of announcing a new trilogy. Some even say this announcement could happen as early as at D23 this coming weekend. Another rumor going around, sort of in conjunction with this one, is that in this next trilogy, Lucasfilm wants to finally show the Jedi Order being fully reestablished. Which, though you could certainly argue seeing that happen in the last trilogy, in the sequel trilogy, would have made more sense, or having it happen off-screen, done by Luke in the 30-year gap between the sequels and original trilogy, and then making the sequels about some sort of great test for the already re-established Jedi Order, instead of doing the whole one final Jedi needs to save the galaxy thing all over again. But anyway, and even though I have no way of knowing if these rumors are true or not, though we will get a new movie someday, I think, well, it does make sense, considering many will argue that the Jedi and the Force are sort of the core of Star Wars. Well, it does make sense that the next trilogy would bring back the Jedi Order in their full glory, if you will, and hopefully introduce some sort of new and or different kind of threat or challenge for them. One different in some way from the Sith, or, I don't know, maybe just them all over again with a different sort of approach or philosophy this time. Something like this also makes sense considering we were told the next films to come out were going to be moving beyond the sequel trilogy, or that they'd take place on the timeline after those films. And so, if we add all these things together and believe those rumors, it sounds like the next trilogy would be about, well, that'd be about Rey remaking the Jedi Order, maybe with Finn at her side, since he was revealed to be Force-sensitive in The Rise of Skywalker. Though one giant glaring problem with that is, we know John Boyega has said he's basically done with Star Wars. Then there's also Daisy Ridley, who plays Rey, who for the most part sounds pretty open to the idea of returning to the franchise someday, but I'm not sure that day is now or even soon, nor am I sure how much the fan base would be eager and excited for her return. And sure, certainly there'd be some who want to see that. Rey does have her fans, don't get me wrong. But there's also many who wouldn't be all too excited to watch Rey rebuild the Jedi Order when that's what they wanted to see Luke do, or what he once did in the expanded universe. Not to mention, bringing back Rey doesn't exactly move on from the Skywalker saga, which is something else they've said they want to do. She is a self-proclaimed Skywalker, after all. And just all around, as I was kind of saying before, she's not the most beloved character ever. She is kind of the poster child for a lot of the reasons why people don't like the sequels, or some people don't like the sequels. However, there is a much beloved character, arguably the most popular and beloved character created so far in the Disney era, who could rebuild the Jedi Order in her stead. That, of course, being Grogu. He could be the one that rebuilds it some years after the end of the sequel trilogy. And I say some years after because they'd have to leave some room for an explanation or story about what happens or becomes of Rey, why she wasn't the one to do it. I don't know, maybe she gives up on everything and everyone and banishes herself to an island or something. That's just an idea off the top of my head for her. But seriously, they could of course just say that she and Grogu rebuild it together, and who knows, maybe with the help of a really, really old Ahsoka, keeping in mind that Dave Filoni said that just because we heard her voice at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, along with all the other Jedi who were dead, that doesn't mean Ahsoka was actually dead. Either way, the new trilogy could begin sometime after the death of Rey, maybe shortly after it, and maybe 60 to 70 years after the sequels. Plenty of time for the Jedi to be back to close to full strength and have plenty of new masters trained and safeguarding the galaxy, and for Grogu to have come of age, and also long since he lost Din Djarin and left the Mandalorians and their ways, assuming he ends up as one of them at some point, which seems pretty likely to happen. And if he does end up fully and officially a Mandalorian, I know he's kind of one already, but he hasn't fully embraced the culture and learned everything about it just yet is what I mean. But anyway, if he fully does become a Mandalorian, that could be rather interesting, that a Mando sort of restarts the Jedi Order, along with Rey, who brings to the table her own unique experiences and perspectives. Which then means he, Grogu, would likely bring some of that Mandalorian influence into the creation of a new Jedi Order and its founding rules and code, and thus would explain perhaps some differences in that code and ideas from how the Jedi of the prequel era operated. Though, assuming Ahsoka was there from the start as well, it could certainly still have some influence from those prequel-era Jedi because of her. And these new ways and ideas for how the Jedi Order or how the Jedi should live and be could quickly get tested by some sort of brand new threat to the galaxy, Or like I said, the Sith coming back in some sort of new form or with a new philosophy of their own. I'm not talking somehow Palpatine has returned again, meaning both sides would be different yet similar to how they once were, so that it wouldn't just be the exact same thing all over again, yet would still feel familiar to some degree. This could also mean that the new trilogy would feel more like a continuation of what's currently going on or will be going on in the Mandoverse shows, more so than what we saw in the sequel trilogy. The new trilogy could even, all be planned out in advance and in conjunction with what's happening in the Mandoverse. Star Wars could, as crazy of an idea as it is, it could have a long-term, well-mapped-out plan and direction for the entire franchise. All the while sort of, shall we say, sidestepping the divisive sequels to a degree without having to flat-out retcon them, which is probably the best-case scenario for anyone who didn't enjoy those films, because, for better or worse, I highly doubt they will ever fully retcon them. That said, I could see them, not being all that embraced or as embraced as they could be in upcoming films and shows, which has already pretty much been the case for the most part. There's been no shows, animated or live action, outside of the short-lived Resistance animated series, that are set in the time period of the sequels or have even been announced to be set in that time period. Though, yes, there have been maybe some loose connections or potential connections between what's going on in the Mandoverse and what we will see eventually in the sequels, but for the most part it's been its own thing and focused elsewhere. And so what could ultimately end up happening is the sequels and everything in and about and leading up to them will be more or less left up to books and comics to explore, which has already started to happen. We've already gotten books and comics that connect with them and attempt to explain some of the inconsistencies and other issues with the story in those films. This all would then fall in line with what Kathleen Kennedy said not too long ago about wanting to move towards persistent storytelling, where they, more or less, and similar to the MCU, where they follow many of the same characters over and over again while bringing new ones in to form one large, cohesive story, hopefully. Which also then means that though Grogu would be a big part of this new trilogy, he'd be the main draw, if you will, since the name Star Wars doesn't quite have the luster it once did. I don't think people will automatically go see a new Star Wars film just because, they once may have. But anyway, likely Grogu would fill, fittingly enough, more of a Yoda role, while a young Jedi or two, along with some other new non-Jedi characters, would be the true main characters of this trilogy. And though, again, this is all based on rumors, something like this wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, as I said, Grogu is by far the most popular and profitable character created in the Disney era. He is going to be a part of Star Wars for a long, long time to come. He can be a thread that connects the next 1,000 years together in universe and the next several decades out of it, all the while making Disney a ton of money in the process. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about this. What do you think about the idea of the next trilogy being about Grogu's Jedi Order, and who knows, maybe being some 70 or 80 years after the sequels and after the era of Rey has come to an end? Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.